Hey, if you're at home, go ahead and grab your Bibles and open up to Psalm chapter 90. If you're watching on your computer, you can open up a new tab on your web browser. You go to BibleGateway.com. We'll be using the NIV version today. If you have your phones or iPads, you can actually go to your app store and download the Youversion Bible App. When you download that, you go to the bottom right-hand corner of the app, click on More, go to Events. You can search for Momentum Christian Church and follow along with the slides that you see on the screen. And you can actually take notes, export the notes, save them for yourself. It's a great way to take notes and come back and review them later. Man, how crazy has this weather been this week, right? I mean, it's just like 2 weeks ago, it was warm enough outside where you could go outside and take a walk around the block with maybe like shorts or maybe just shorts and a hoodie. And this week, Friday, we had snow, and it just like kept snowing. You know, this warm, cold weather thing, it's just really been messing with me, and I'm sure if you've got allergies, man, it's messing with you. You sneeze, and you're like, you don't know if it's allergies or if you got the corona, you know, like you're just trying to figure out, like, what's going on in this weather. And I know it's Ohio. I get it, it's Ohio, but this, man, it's just been from one extreme to the other, and we've got a bay window that sits right behind our sink in our kitchen, and I often find myself sipping coffee and staring out the back window into our backyard and wondering, like, does this weather, going from one extreme to the other, does this weather mess with the animals the way that it does with us? Watching the chipmunks and the squirrels and the birds and things, and I can't help but think that it does mess with them just a little bit. I'll give you an example. A couple weeks ago, it was one of the warm days. There was not a cloud in the sky. Man, the sun was high. It was awesome. My kids wanted to play outside, so I was in the backyard and cleaning up some brush from an oak tree that we have in our backyard, and I was burning it in a barrel. And I realized while I was outside that there was a bill that I had forgotten to pay. And rather than, I didn't want to like forget it again, and I was getting close to like being late to where I was going to have to pay a late fee. I'm like, I'm not paying a late fee. I just need to stop what I'm doing, just leave this kind of where it's at, and I need to go inside and I need to pay this bill now before I forget again. And so I just left things, I went inside, and at the time, my computer was downstairs in our basement where I do most of my work. Kind of, I got a little office space set up, and our basement is mostly below ground level. And so I didn't, we keep one like small lamp on down there. It's got an LED light bulb, and we just leave it on, so when we have to run downstairs to the freezer to get, you know, whatever vegetable or meat we're cooking that night, that we don't have to turn on like all the lights. We can just go downstairs, grab what we need, and go back upstairs. And so I came in from outside where it was really bright, and I went downstairs where it was like completely dark except for the one lamp. I flipped open the lid of my computer, and I started to sign into the website to pay my bill. And as I get it all set up, as I'm about to hit the final submit payment button, I got that eerie feeling that I'm not the only one in the room. You know, you ever had that? Like, I thought I caught some movement of something out of the corner of my eye to my right here, but I didn't see anything. And this is what it looks like down in my basement. And this is just that one light that we keep on, or keep that top one on. And so I'm sitting there, and I don't see anything. And we brightened this picture just a little bit. And so I just kind of turned back to my computer, and I just went through and submitted my final payment. And at that moment, I grab the computer lid and I go to shut it, and as I shut the computer lid, in real life Dolby Digital surround sound, I hear like a fluttering. Whoa, you know, like, what was that? And I look over to my left, and I don't see anything, and I turn back to my right, like slowly, just like I don't see anything. And as I turn back to my right, a bird flies at my face, and it scares me because I didn't realize. I mean, it went this way, but somehow circled back around. It flew at my face, and I screamed like a wimp, ah, you know. And I jumped out of my chair, and I got a tall back of my chair, and so I turned the chair around to be like a shield for me, you know. And I'm letting the birds in there, and now it's like there's a bird in my house, and so I have to figure out what to do. So I kind of gather things real quick, and I go back upstairs, and I tell everybody, I was like, hey, here's the deal. No need to panic, but there's a bird in the house. And guys, here's the deal. Like, I like birds, right? They're beautiful, majestic, whatever other like poetic words that you want to use. But I don't want them in my house. And full disclosure, if I'm stuck in an enclosed space with them, I'm actually afraid of them, right? Because they're so unpredictable what they're going to do. And plus, they have the unfair advantage that they can fly. And so I go upstairs and I tell them, hey, don't panic, like your dad did, don't panic. But I need you all to go to a different room. We have a bird in our basement, and I need to get the bird out of the house. And so they all get up, and they all go in one direction to like leave the room, except for Berkeley, my youngest daughter. She goes in a different direction. I just assume she wants to go to a different room. I'm the protector of the house, and whether it's a burglar or winged creature, I need to get it out of the house. And so everyone was good, and I'm getting ready to go back and take the bird out of the house. But Berkeley, she had other plans. Where I thought she was going to hide, she was actually going to gather a weapon and make a game plan. Here, check out this video this morning.
When the birds come in, we're going to hammer at the birds and they will die.
And you're okay if the bird dies?
Yeah.
Gotcha.
And then we're going to take them off and put it in the house.
Got it.
Thanks for protecting us.
If there anybody come in the house, we're going to pat them at the hammer and put them in the house.
Good job. That'll be a good job.
See, when we have the hammer, we're going to put them in the hammer, and then we're going to take them out and put them in the house.
Good.
And there will be anybody in here again.
There'll be no birds. Got it.
When more birds come in here, we're going to hammer, and put them in the house.
Good job.
And then they'll go die.
They will die.
Yeah, see, she wasn't having any of it, was she? I mean, here her dad is scared to death of a bird. I just wanted to get the thing back outside. Berkeley was ready to end it. You know, Abby, my wife in there, would say, you're okay if the bird dies? Uh-huh. You know, and we take it off and we put it in the trash. Now, my suspicion is that if the bird actually would have, if she actually hit the bird with the hammer and the bird would have actually died and she saw it, my guess is it would have been a different story, that she would not have been that okay with it. But you see, Berkeley is young enough that she doesn't really understand what to die means. Now, Hadley, my oldest, and KJ, middle daughter, they're starting to get it, you know, and they're starting to understand and grapple with things, especially as a result of the conversations that they're hearing on the news and mom and dad have and other people have, like in their school class, you know, their digital classrooms and stuff. They're starting to grapple with that people pass away, like realizing that this life isn't guaranteed. You know, and that's a difficult thing to be confronted with. And my guess is it's similar in your homes right now as well, or maybe with the people that you work with on Zoom calls that you've been a part of. Right? The reality is we all, sooner or later, are confronted with the reality of death. Man, and I'm so thankful, and I consider us lucky and blessed that Berkeley, like she hasn't had to be confronted with the reality of someone that she loves close to her passing away yet, but we know sooner or later she will, right? And many of you, right? Many of you have been confronted with this reality. Right? There's probably several of you who were confronted as a kid way before a kid should ever have to deal with a reality like this. Right? You lost a loved one that should have just been there for you for your entire life, but due to something unforeseen, some sickness, accident, they're not, you know? Maybe some of you know someone who's lost someone as a result of this virus. Right? The reality is that sooner or later we are confronted with, we are vincible. We are vulnerable. Right? Something that we can't even see, this virus, or know that we even came into contact with, has the ability to wipe us out. Right? In this time of quarantine and COVID-19, it's really just magnifying an issue that we've always known about, right? And really what it's done is it has just brought it to the surface and kind of forced us to deal with it. It's confronted us head on. See, COVID-19 hasn't introduced us to the idea of death, but it has magnified it and brought it and forced the conversation of things that maybe we've been trying to put off. There's a famous Benjamin Franklin quote that goes like this, that nothing in life can be said to be certain except death and taxes. Now, I knew that this was a quote. I didn't know for sure who it was that had said it. And so I was like, man, I kind of realized as I was looking into it, is like, yeah, that's true. It's a funny quote, but really, one of these things is kind of up for grabs, and we've seen that with even our government delaying when our taxes are due. And I started writing about how, that's kind of true. And then I found this quote from a famous country artist that says this. It says, they say death and taxes are the only things that are inevitable. The truth is, you can not pay your taxes. I've done it, and there's consequences, but it can be done. Death, though, you're not going to get out of, and you kind of have to deal with it. You have no idea how much joy it brings me to quote Steve Earle in a message on Sunday morning, the guy who wrote Copperhead Road in a message about Jesus. But it's so true, right? Like you can, right? There's consequences. Yeah, sure. Like you can avoid paying your taxes, but you can't really avoid death. Sooner or later, death is going to get you. People, right? There's people whose stories are documented in the Bible. They've wrestled with this just like we do, just like Benjamin Franklin, just like Steve Earle. They have, for history, as long as humanity has been around, we've wrestled with this idea and this reality of the brevity of life. Right? They've wrestled with this question. And we have many of their thoughts and prayers recorded for us in the Bible that this isn't a new thing. Right, wrestling with the reality of life and death, this isn't a new thing, but moments like this just magnifies the conversation for us. And so we're going to jump in to Psalm 90 today, and there's some interesting things about Psalm 90 that I want to let you know about. The book of Psalms in our Bible, it's really like a collection. It's like a prayer journal. It's a collection of prayers and songs and poems that people wrote about to and for God. Many of them were sung or read with music in the background or a choir, much like we do our services here at Momentum. Many of the Psalms in our Bible were written by a guy named King David. Perhaps you remember that, you recognize that name as the guy who killed the giant named Goliath in the Bible. But there were Psalms written by many other authors. But this one, Psalm 90 that we're looking at today, is the only psalm in the entire Bible that's attributed to a guy named Moses. Now, Moses is the guy in the Bible who God sent to save a group of people out of slavery in Egypt. And he shows up way early in history. In fact, he shows up in Exodus chapter 2. If we had our paperback house Bibles, that would be page 44 in our church paperback house Bibles. And he writes Psalm 90, and even though it's way towards the beginning of the story of the Bible, he wrestles with this question. Psalm 90, verse 2, he starts this way. He says, before the mountains were born, or you brought forth the whole world from everlasting to everlasting, you are God. And he begins like, before the mountains were born. Right? Before the mountains were born, or you brought forth the whole world, before you spoke these things into existence, it starts with acknowledging who God is. God, you don't have a beginning. God, you don't have an end. You are God. And then Moses goes on to contrast and wrestle with exactly what we've already talked about. He says in verse 3, he goes on, he says, you turn people back to dust, saying, return to dust, you mortals, which I did some research, and what I could find on this is actually this was originally written in Hebrew, and this is a pretty rough translation of the original Hebrew, but really what Moses is trying to do is contrast, God, you don't have a beginning, you don't have an end, you exist outside of time, but we do. But we do. And so he goes on. It says, God, to you, 1,000 years in your sight, they're like a day that's just gone by, or like a watch in the night. Yet you sweep people away in the sleep of death. They are like new grass in the morning. In the morning it springs up new, but by evening it is dry and withered. Right? He says, 1,000 years for you is like a day. It's just a moment. People are like new grass in the morning, withered by evening. Now see, the author here, Moses, he would have in mind the grass that he sees in Palestine that's green and full in the morning as it's nourished from the dew, but it's dry because the sun gets so high and hot that it's dry and withered by the evening. The idea that he's going after poetically here is our life is brief. It's really but a breath, you know. Another psalm, so later in history, you advance several years, and just showing how we have wrestled with this question throughout history. Another psalm that we have written by the guy named King David, the one that kills the giant Goliath. He writes this in Psalm 39 in like a prayer to God. He says, "Show me, Lord, my life's end and the number of my days. Let me know how fleeting my life is. You have made my days a mere handbreadth. The span of my years is nothing before you. Everyone is but a breath. Even those who seem secure." You know, once again, putting in place really what we've already talked about, but still wrestling with this same question of, man, look at how brief our life is. And then he goes on in verse 6, and he says this, it says, "Surely everyone goes around like a mere phantom." How cool is it the Bible uses the word phantom? "In vain they rush about, heaping up wealth without knowing whose it will finally be." Man, can we resonate with that right now? Right? There's one of the things that I think has been great as a result of this time of quarantine is it has really focused us back in on what matters, right? We have to and we want to be able to provide for our families, but man, I have seen so many pictures and posts and statuses of people posting on social media about how they now, because they don't have anything else to do, they're having family game nights together. You're eating dinner around the dinner table and having discussions and laughing and talking about things that matter as a family or as friends. I see Zoom calls happening with people just trying to connect and play games with each other, right? I'm seeing tons of birthday drive-bys. You know, and you, like students, that you have birthdays right now. I know that if you were given the choice, this is not how you would have chose to celebrate your birthday. You would not choose a birthday drive-by as your birthday party. But man, in some ways, how cool is it? How to see how special people see you, and they want to make sure that you are celebrated on your special day. By the way, happy belated birthday, Journey. And seeing people drive by and hold signs and say, man, I don't want to let your day go by without you being celebrated. Man, that's so cool. And Zoom calls. I'm hearing of Zoom calls where people are talking with family members that are across the country, and we've always had the ability to connect and talk, and you never didn't talk for any specific reason, but now because this has been brought to the surface, we realize, man, I can connect, and I could be a family, and we can talk and enjoy each other. We've got to keep that stuff up, even when this is all gone. You see, and I think what David is writing about here in Psalm 39 is really just trying to point to what the crux of Psalm 90 is, of what Moses writes. So we jump back into Psalm 90, and you jump down a couple verses, and Moses says this. It says, "God, teach us to number our days, that we may gain a heart of wisdom." You see, where we left off after the last verse, Moses goes on and he goes back and forth, really pointing to how brief our life is and contrasting that to how everlasting God is. And then he finally centers in on the point here. Like, what's the point of all this bad, depressing news about how brief our life is? And he says, God, teach us to number our days. God, teach us to number our days so that we may have a heart of wisdom. You see, in other places in the Bible, it teaches that the beginning of wisdom is fearing God, that the fear of God is the beginning of wisdom. And it's not fear like, oh no, I got to stay away. It's fear with like the idea of respect and reverence and understanding how powerful it is. And we get this, and we do this in other ways. This is the reason you look both ways before you cross the street. Because you understand the power of a car and what would happen if you stepped out in front of it. Right? We're not necessarily afraid of cars. We just have a reverence. We have a respect and understanding for what it is capable of. The idea here is respect and reverence and understanding of just how powerful God is and just how not powerful we are. And so Moses says, teach us, help us understand. And so this is something I want you to start praying with me. I want you to add this as something to pray for. God, teach us to number our days. God, teach us to number our days so that we may gain a heart of wisdom. Right? Not from some morbid standpoint of wanting to know what the end is, not from an unhealthy place, but from a place to help us make sure that we're running after what matters. I think here he's praying, asking God, like, teach us to number our days in hopes that we don't wait until it's too late to make sure we've been running after what matters. When our lives do end, we don't have to grapple with the question of, did I do what I should have done? And I recognize, like, this is a little heavy-handed as we, like, start this series out, but this question is real. And Jesus, he gives us some wisdom behind that. Now, it's not going to look like wisdom at first, but stay with me. Let's unpack it, because this is where the hope begins to come into the picture. Jesus is teaching one time, and he gives his disciples, he gives his students some encouragement. He says this in Luke chapter 12, verse 4. He says, I tell you, my friends, do not be afraid of those who kill the body, and after that can do no more. But I will show you whom you should fear. Fear him who, after your body has been killed, has authority to throw you into hell. Yes, I tell you, fear him. Now, for those signing into Momentum for the very first time, you're new to Momentum or stepping digitally back into church after stepping away for some time, I need to make sure that you hear right away this morning, this is not a normal preaching technique of Jesus. Right? This kind of thing may be one of the reasons why you stepped out of church years ago. Not too terribly long ago, I was driving down a main drag one time, and there was a church there, and I saw this sign, and I just couldn't get past it. I pulled into the parking lot, got out of my car, and took a picture. Yes, that's a motion LED sign that says, stop, drop, and roll, won't work in hell. And just to, like, add insult to injury, these flames right here, they were motion flames. So it was like, it was really sending the picture home, you know. Now, I know that this is an attempt at humor, right, or to get someone thinking, but for many people, this is how we picture God, because this is how preachers and maybe parents in some cases or authorities talk to us about God, right? Straighten up, get your act together, or suffer the consequences. And that's what the conversation becomes over and over again. The conversation becomes more of one of someone hurling threats rather than about who God is, how much he loves you, and what he's done for us. You see, the reality is that Jesus did talk about this, right? We can't get around that. He says that in Luke chapter 12. And he gives us this warning about life. But what we have more of from Jesus is Jesus bringing life to people, right? Bringing hope in the midst of uncertainty. He's bringing endless second chances for people who thought that they were all out of chances. Peace in the middle of anxiety, joy in the midst of pain. We have Jesus bringing people life. But the fact that we have those types of teachings more from Jesus doesn't negate the fact that sooner or later we have to wrestle with the brevity of life. And so Jesus introduces it here to his friends, not as a scare tactic, right? Not as a fall in line sort of deal, but in hopes that we realize what's at stake. Jesus wants to help us win spiritually. He wants to help you win spiritually. And he says, I came to bring you life now and after this life. And that's for all of us. You know, a couple weeks ago, we talked through a story that's found in Matthew chapter 9 in your Bibles. And Jesus lets this one publicly despised sinner named Matthew join his crew. And it causes an uproar amongst everybody. Some people who are already in his crew. It causes an uproar among the religious teachers, the religious authorities of the day. In fact, they start questioning, Jesus, Jesus, if you're such a religious teacher, right, you shouldn't be hanging out with sinners. What are you doing, Jesus? They said, and they asked this question, and word gets to Jesus. And Jesus responded to them by saying, it's not the healthy that need a doctor, but it's the sick. I didn't come to call the righteous, but the sinners. And that's the part of the story that we focused on a couple weeks ago. But Matthew, the guy who actually is the one led into the crew, when he retells the story, he includes something else Jesus says in that moment. And I think it sticks out to him because he fit into this. So he goes on, and Jesus was probably standing up to some of, Matthew's, friends, so to speak. So Jesus goes on, and Matthew retells the story. He says this. Jesus says, but go and learn what this means. Jesus says this to the religious teachers. Now, first, we're going to pause there for a second and just remind you, this is Jesus speaking to the people that would see, that are the religious authorities. And Jesus pauses it. And my second point about this is, could you ever imagine saying this to a teacher and it not being offensive? All right, teacher, hey, you know what? Pause, stop. You go and learn what this means, and once you figure it out and you know what it means, then you can come back and we can have a conversation. That's what Jesus does in this moment. And Jesus says, okay, you know what, religious teachers, you go and learn what this means. And he goes on and he says this, I desire mercy, not sacrifice. For I have not come to call the righteous, but the sinners. You see, and when Jesus says this right here, this part, he's actually quoting from the Old Testament, the first part of the Bible. And I wanted to end on this verse because this is the good news. This is where the hope comes in. Not only is this Jesus teaching, right, but this is God in human form saying, I came to bring people who aren't perfect into my family. But it also reveals the heart of God. God, desires mercy, not sacrifice. God desires mercy. You see, mercy is not getting something that you do deserve. And this right here is Jesus tipping the hand to anyone who might be wondering, does God want me? Can God forgive me? Can I really find life in Jesus? Could God really let me start over? Does God forgive even me? Am I too far gone? This is Jesus shouting a resounding, I did not come to punish and take life from you. I came because I desire mercy. I came because I will pay the price that you could not pay so that I could love you. This is Jesus saying, man, until we die, we are never too far gone. And what we're told to do is we're told to believe in Jesus, that he is who he said he is, and he did what he said that he would do, that he died on the cross to pay the price of our sins, separating us from God. But dead is not where he stayed, and 3 days later, God raised him from the dead. And we're to believe that, and we're to begin submitting to Jesus as the shot caller of our life, which in the Bible is almost always initiated with baptism, where we are buried in water, we're dunked, completely submersed in water, symbolizing the death of our old self and the beginning of a new life where we are following Jesus from now on. And so what I want to do is I want to challenge you in this series, as much as it depends on you, be here. Sign in to mochurch.tv and begin to look at the answers as we look at the answers that God gives us for our tough questions about life and death and hope. You know, when the bird was in our house, it surprised me, but I also surprised it. I could tell that. It also surprised my dog, Dallas, a 100-pound dog. She went nuts, man. She's chasing this bird around. This bird was freaking out. Now, and I've got a mix of unfinished ceiling in my basement and drop ceiling in different rooms. And the bird, when it freaked out, it got scared, and it went up in between the joists in the floor and actually got behind the drop ceiling in the basement. And I could hear it as it's like flying and trying to get out and, hitting between the floorboards and the ceiling. And I was like, you know what? I'm done. I just wanted to pay a bill. I just didn't want to forget about it. I didn't want to come in here and have to deal with this. I just want to get back outside and enjoy the sunshine. But now I'm down here and I got to deal with this. You know what? And it got behind the drop ceiling. I was like, I don't want to deal with this anymore. If I just go upstairs and I shut the door, if I just stay up there long enough, sooner or later it'll figure itself out. And that's true, but there would be some unfortunate consequences to if I let that happen. One would be like eventually it would die. I'd know it would die. But then there would be the consequence, like it would die somewhere behind the drop ceiling, and if I can't find it, as the body begins to decompose, it would stink up the house, and the furnace is downstairs, so it would blow the smell all over the house. If it did get back out from behind the drop ceiling, it would poop and scratch up everywhere as it like frantically tries to get out of the house. It's like, I don't want to deal with this right now. I was tired and in the middle of something, and I just wanted to get back outside. But all of a sudden, because of something unexpected, I was confronted with a problem that I knew I needed to deal with now. COVID-19, it has not introduced us to the reality of the fact that we are vincible. It has just magnified it. And it has, if you don't know the answers to the questions that keep you up at night about our reality and the fact that we do have a brevity of life, you need to come back next week to keep this conversation going. Don't put it off. Don't slam the door to the basement and pretend like it's not something that you need to deal with. Have you thought about what it looks like whenever this life comes to a close for you? We're going to look at that as we continue this series over the next couple of weeks.